All right, let's talk about 44-year-old Catherine Guziejka, who's currently behind bars in Smith County, Texas, because she is accused of kicking toddlers in her care at Pumpkin Doodle's Daycare. And it was apparently all caught on surveillance footage. I want to bring in Russell Button, a daycare and child injury attorney in Texas, who unfortunately, we've had him on before, not because we don't like you, Russell, but because these are the things we're talking about. What are your initial impressions on this story?
First off, Jesse, what happened to these innocent kids at Pumpkin Doodle's Daycare is horrific. I mean, it is just heartbreaking when we first learned that this abuse had been going on for so long and happens so often to multiple children. Thankfully, the individual caregivers in jail and will never be allowed to work with kids in Texas again. But this entire situation is a reminder to parents across the nation. Child abuse and neglect is happening.
Now, the sheriff's office said in the affidavit that it, quote, was apparent that Guziejka's actions were random, intentional, unprovoked, violent in nature, and done for the sole intent of inflicting pain. Russell, that is very important language and a very important description. What do you take away from that?
You know, when I hear that and when we see these types of things happening, the most alarming thing is, how did this go on for so long? What sort of culture was in place that the other caregivers either allowed this to happen and didn't say anything, the director and owner allowed this to happen and didn't say anything, because the degree of what you're describing and what we've seen happened here is just so horrific and alarming for such a long period of time. There absolutely should be these criminal charges being brought, and to the fullest extent of the law.
I haven't seen it, but there's no lawsuit that's filed as of yet. But you're suggesting that it's only, what, a matter of time?
It should be. I mean, you know, we hope that when something traumatic happens to a child at a daycare, that it's not just reported to the police and to the state, but they're actually held accountable civilly, because the criminal system is just punishing the individual. But with what happens to the child, what happens to accountability for negligence, that has to be done through the civil aspect. And so while I'm not aware that there are any lawsuits or any attorneys that have been retained for this yet, there absolutely could and should be one here to hold them accountable and make sure to expose this and bring a bigger light to it. In that small of a town and that small of a community, this should never happen. And if something's not done about it, it's going to open up a door that, hey, this is going to be okay and acceptable behavior, which it is absolutely not.
Let me ask you this, if this complicates it at all. The owner of this daycare, Ms. Law, who I mentioned before, she spoke with Texas news outlet KSLA and told them that she has sold the daycare to a new owner. They're going to be reopening it this month under a new name. Does that complicate anything?
Not at all. Even though this owner, who was also the director of the daycare, sold the daycare when all this came to light, Pumpkin Doodles can and should still be held accountable for its failures. They can't just escape justice by simply selling off the company. You know, we see people try to do that. That's not the way it works. Consulting with an experienced daycare and child injury lawyer like our team, that's what we do. We have experiences in cases like this where an owner or a daycare owner closed down the daycare, even if they didn't try to sell it off. That is not a way to escape justice as well. They can't get away with it. There's things in place for that. There's also insurance coverage that's in place for these things. That doesn't just simply go away because you sold the company or closed down your daycare.
All right. Well, let's see what happens. I'll tell you, Guziejka currently behind bars, reportedly on a $450,000 bond. No word yet on when she'll be back in court, but we'll see. Just another horrifying case of alleged child abuse that we're seeing in these daycares. But Russell, really, thank you so much, Russell Button. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate you.